Some people who've read this say that they found themselves sort of, how can I read another page of this? How can I read such awful atrocities, often committed by tools around a farm?
Killing in the Armenian genocide was done so much by hand, so much by gruesome implements, tannery tools, farm tools, hoes, rakes, knives, and axes. And there is a lot of gore in this story, and yet the story is so remarkable in its evolution that I'm finding that people are saying, I can't stop reading, even though I would think that the atrocity would deter me in some way. I want to keep finding out how he survives, and I want to understand more deeply how the structure of the Armenian genocide happened.
Some speculate that Hitler knew about the Armenian genocide, and therefore it was one of the things that influenced what he did.
I think one of the most important links between the Armenian genocide and the Nazi genocide of the Jews of Europe can be found in Hitler's statement made 8 days before invading Poland in 1939, who today, after all, speaks of the annihilation of the Armenians. Hitler was...
He said that
absolutely
8 days before invaded Poland.
Yes.
Who speaks
today of the annihilation of the Armenians?
So we can do whatever we want to.
We can do whatever we want to, and history gets forgotten. You know, who today remembers? The Armenian genocide was the most covered international human rights disaster of the second decade of the 20th century. By the late 1930s, Hitler saw that it had disappeared down the memory hole.
Yeah.
And
okay, tell me his story and what happened and how he was able to survive.
Well, you know, he was arrested, of course, with this notable band of 250 intellectuals
and
cultural leaders, prominent figures.
In Constantinople.
Yes, Constantinople. And this night of April 24 is the night that Armenians commemorate now the Armenian genocide worldwide.
There's no question this was planned by the central government.
Absolutely none, no. I mean, you can see that there are systematic arrests happening throughout Turkey from the middle of April of 1915 on throughout the summer of 1915, village by village, city by city, town by town. You have the routine of a town crier ordering the Armenians to a central square. You have the deportation marches being set up with the provincial police. And then you have the ordering of killing squads. And this is coming from the Ittihad Central Committee. And the killing squads were administered by something called a special organization. And what the Turkish government did was let out some 30,000 prisoners from jails and organize them into killing bands. And it was a pretty innovative idea. I mean, let's make use of our killing manpower. And again, I think that in some way this can even foreshadow the Einsatzgruppen that the Nazis used. The Nazis did have mobile killing squads, especially in the, in the period before the camps became the focus of mass killing.
And were 1 million people killed in a year?
I think 1 million people were killed between 1915 and the spring of 1916, and then another 200,000 massacred in the Syrian deserts of 1916 in Deir Zor. So we know by the end of the summer of 1916 we have at least 1.2 million people murdered, and it's 2/3 of the Armenian population of Turkey living on their historic homelands were eradicated.
What role does it play in Turkish politics?
Well, the Armenian genocide today has become absolutely a almost obsessive issue for the Turkish government. I mean, they are spending millions of dollars a year engineering campaigns of propaganda to deny, to undermine, to sanitize, to try to rewrite history. And it has become a kind of almost, a lightning rod inside of Turkey, because people who want to speak truthfully about the events of 1915 often find themselves at great risk. Orhan Pamuk, Turkey's Nobel laureate, faced trial because he mentioned the Armenian genocide, and he mentioned the word over 1 million, the phrase over 1 million. This was seen as a crime against the Turkish state.
I'm struck with this thought. because this is a huge issue for the Turks as well as it is for the Armenians, and you know, it therefore becomes in some ways part of the political dimension as Turkey reaches out to play an increasing role in a kind of new world order.
Right.
Turkey wants to be, you know, is a secular state, but wants to be a transition, wants to be a bridge between the Western world and the Muslim world.
I think that the Armenian genocide remains a kind of linchpin for Turkey's modernization, because it's an event that the Turkish government refuses to acknowledge honestly. And I think of what President Obama said in the Turkish parliament in April, very candidly, and
what did he say?
I think very riskily, you know, very edgily to the Turkish leadership, when he said, an unresolved history will become a burden too complicated to carry. You must deal with your past honestly. And he was referring to the events of 1915 and the extermination of the Armenians. And I think that he said it perceptively, that an unresolved history of this kind will hinder Turkey's efforts to become that leader, become that bridge between East and West, to join the EU, because human rights remain one of that country's biggest problems, both past and present. And I see the Armenian genocide as very much connected to Turkey's present problems as well, because this is about dealing with minority populations and dealing with equality and democracy. And until you can acknowledge your past properly, it's hard to go forward.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me. Good to be back with you.
Armenian Golgotha, a memoir of the Armenian Genocide, 1915 to 1918. Grigoris Balakian, translated by Peter Balakian with Aris Savag.
That's right.
Thank you for joining us. See you next time.